The following account was found among the personal papers of Cardinal Joseph Bertoli, who mysteriously disappeared in Rome in the winter of 1987. His notes, written in archaic Latin and Portuguese, were discovered in a vault in the basement of the Vatican Apostolic Library, along with photographs that should never have been taken and maps not found in any official archives. What you are about to read will forever alter your understanding of the secrets the Church has guarded for centuries. It was March 1968 when Father Francis Toretti received the call that would change his life forever. On the other end of the line, a trembling, familiar voice, that of Padre Pio of Pietrelcina himself, whispered words that seemed to come from another world. "Francis, my son, they have found it. What I saw in my visions, it is happening in Egypt. You must go. You must see it with your own eyes before it is too late." Toretti was well acquainted with Padre Pio's supernatural manifestations. He had witnessed the stigmata, the bilocations, the mystical ecstasies that left the holy man suspended between heaven and earth for hours. But this time, there was something different in the Capuchin's voice. A terror that transcended human fear, as if he had glimpsed something that should not exist on this plane of reality. "The visions began 3 months ago," Padre Pio continued, his ragged breath echoing through the phone. "I see a desert red as blood, stones that weep tears of gold, and a presence that belongs neither to heaven nor to hell." The Vatican archaeologists dug deeper than they should have. They found something that was sealed for millennia for a reason. The call was abruptly cut off, leaving Toretti with more questions than answers. The next day, a sealed envelope bearing the papal seal arrived at his office at the Pontifical Institute of Christian Archaeology. Inside, a single sheet of paper with geographical coordinates and a message in Latin. "Quod absconditum est revelatum erit." What is hidden will be revealed. Toretti left for Egypt in April, officially as part of an expedition to catalog Coptic manuscripts. But his true mission would take him to the heart of the Western Desert, miles from any civilization, where a secret excavation funded by the Vatican's private coffers had unearthed something that defied both archaeology and theology. The excavation site was a rock formation that did not appear on any official map. Dr. Henry Miller, a German archaeologist with obscure connections to the Ahnenerbe, the Nazi SS's archaeological research organization, led the operation. Miller had survived the war and found refuge in the Church, bringing with him knowledge gained from expeditions that history preferred to forget. His theories about the existence of pre-Adamite beings and antediluvian civilizations were considered heretical by conventional academic circles, but they had piqued the interest of certain factions within the Vatican. When Toretti arrived at the camp, the first thing he noticed was the silence. There were no birds, insects, or any sound of life in the desert surrounding the excavation. The Egyptian workers themselves seemed disturbed, whispering among themselves in dialects Toretti couldn't identify. Some constantly made the sign of the cross, others carried amulets that mixed Christian symbols with ancient hieroglyphs. "Father Toretti," Miller greeted him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome to what may be the most important discovery in Christian history, or the most dangerous." The German archaeologist had aged prematurely in recent months. His hair, once brown, was now completely white, and his hands trembled slightly as he pointed to the entrance of the excavation. The structure they had discovered defied all known architectural conventions. The stones were cut with a precision that rivaled modern technology, fitting together perfectly without mortar. Strange hieroglyphs covered the walls, symbols not found in any dictionary of ancient writing, yet somehow familiar, as if etched into humanity's collective memory. "We found this 6 months ago," Miller explained, as they descended a staircase that deepened into the living rock. Initially, we thought it was a Ptolemaic temple, but carbon-14 dating indicates the structure is at least 6,000 years old, predating any known civilization in Egypt. The lanterns cast dancing shadows on the engraved walls, creating the illusion that the hieroglyphic figures were moving. Torretti noticed that many of the symbols seemed to represent winged beings. Not the conventional Egyptian divinities, but creatures with multiple wings and faces that resembled the biblical descriptions of seraphim and cherubim. There was something disturbing about those representations, a quality that suggested they were not created as religious art, but as warnings. "What did you find down there?" Torretti asked, though a part of him already knew he didn't want to hear the answer. Miller stopped abruptly and turned to face him. His eyes, which had previously shone with scientific enthusiasm, now carried a mixture of fascination and terror. "We found a burial chamber, Father, but it's not like any tomb we've ever seen. There's no mummy, no sarcophagus. There's only a presence, and evidence that this presence has been active very recently." The descent continued for another 100 meters until they reached an antechamber illuminated by spotlights, powered by generators that hummed constantly in the desert above. The temperature here was significantly lower than on the surface, and the air had a strange metallic smell, as if it were electrically charged. Scientific instruments scattered around the site measured radiation, magnetic fields, and other anomalies that the expedition's scientists couldn't explain. "The equipment began detecting anomalies 3 weeks after we opened the main chamber," said Dr. Sarah Chen, a quantum physicist who had been discreetly recruited by the Vatican. "Electromagnetic fields fluctuating without a discernible pattern, radiation that doesn't correspond to any known element, and," she hesitated, looking nervously at Miller, "seismic readings suggesting movement in the sealed chamber, even when no one is there." Torretti felt a shiver run down his spine. Father Pio's words echoed in his mind, a presence belonging neither to heaven nor hell. He began to understand that they weren't just dealing with archaeology, but something that transcended human comprehension. The entrance to the main chamber was sealed by a stone door covered in symbols that seemed to pulse with their own light when viewed peripherally. Miller explained that they had needed industrial drilling equipment to create a small opening, just large enough for a person to squeeze through. "Before we go in," said Miller, his voice dropping to a whisper, "you need to understand what we're going to find.
It's not just a tomb, it's a prison. And I fear that by opening it, we may have unleashed something that should have remained confined forever." The interior of the main chamber defied every law of physics Torretti knew. The space seemed larger on the inside than its external dimensions should allow, as if Euclidean geometry didn't apply. The walls curved upward, disappearing into darkness, creating the sensation of being inside an impossible sphere. In the center of the chamber, where a sarcophagus should have been, there was only a circular depression in the stone. But it wasn't empty. Suspended in mid-air, approximately 6 feet above the ground, hovered a form that defied description. It wasn't exactly visible, but its presence was undeniable, like trying to see something through frosted glass, knowing something is there, but unable to discern precise details. "Can you see it?" asked Chen, pointing instruments towards the anomaly. "The sensors detect a considerable mass, but the cameras can't register anything definitive. It's as if it exists on a spectrum beyond normal human perception." Torretti approached slowly, feeling an increasing pressure in his mind, as if something were trying to make contact. Words began to form in his thoughts, not in Italian, Portuguese, or Latin, but in a language that seemed to predate the Tower of Babel, when all of humanity spoke a single tongue. I am the one who fell before the fall, the one who knew the Creator face to face and questioned his will. You have opened the seal that has kept me confined since before your ancestors learned to make fire. Toretti stumbled backward, his legs trembling. The voice in his mind wasn't malevolent in the traditional sense, but it carried a weight of knowledge and experience that threatened to crush his human understanding. He instinctively understood that he was in the presence of one of the Nephilim, the offspring of the sons of God mentioned in Genesis, beings that existed before the Great Flood and whose knowledge was deemed too dangerous for humanity. You crave knowledge, the voice continued. You want to understand the secrets of the cosmos, the true nature of reality. I can give you that, but the price is higher than your mortal minds can imagine. Get out of here, whispered Miller, pulling Toretti by the arm, now, before it's too late. But Toretti felt compelled to stay. Part of him, the part that had always sought to understand the mysteries of faith, wanted to hear more. He wanted to understand how a fallen celestial being could be confined in a tomb in the Egyptian desert, and why the Vatican would expend considerable resources to find it. Your church, the presence continued, was built on foundations it does not understand. The early Christians knew of our existence. They knew that some of us remained on earth after the flood, confined in prisons created by those you call angels. But the knowledge was suppressed, hidden in apocryphal texts and oral traditions that were systematically eliminated. The implications of the words hit Toretti like a thunderbolt. If this being was telling the truth, then the official history of Christianity was merely a sanitized version of far more complex and disturbing events. The Church was not merely a religious institution, but a guardian of secrets that could shake the very foundations of human civilization. At this point in the narrative, it is important to note that discoveries like this are not isolated. If you wish to continue receiving accounts of the hidden secrets shaping our reality, consider subscribing to our channel, for only by gradually revealing these truths can we prepare humanity for what is to come. Chen started screaming as his instruments detected a sudden surge in electromagnetic activity. The lights flickered, and for a moment the form suspended in midair became almost visible, a mass of golden wings and eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. The sound emanating from the creature wasn't audible in the conventional sense, but it reverberated through the bones of those present, a frequency that seemed to tune in to something primal in the human brain. The seals are weakening, Miller yelled over the growing noise. We need to get out, now. But when they turned to the exit, they discovered that the opening they had created in the stone door had sealed itself shut. They were trapped in the chamber with an entity that had been confined since before human civilization began. Do not fear, the voice echoed in their minds. I do not wish to harm you. I only desire freedom. And in return, I can offer you knowledge that will transform your understanding of reality. Knowledge about the true nature of time, space, and life itself. Toretti felt his Christian faith clashing with his thirst for knowledge. This being claimed to predate the fall of Lucifer, one of God's earliest creations, who had questioned the divine plan not out of malice, but out of a deeper understanding of the cosmic implications of divine actions. Your Pope Pius XII knew of our existence, the entity continued. Why do you think he authorized secret excavations all over the world? Why do you think he established contacts with Nazi scientists after the war? He understood that the Church needed to be prepared for when the seals began to weaken. The revelations continued to flow. Father Toretti learned that at least 12 similar prisons existed worldwide, each containing one of the Nephilim captured before the flood. Some were under the control of the Catholic Church, others guarded by secret organizations tracing their roots back to the Templars and early Christian Gnostics. Modern technology is accelerating the process, the entity explained. Your radio transmissions, your electricity, your nuclear experiments, it all creates interference in the fields that keep the seals active. In a few decades, we will no longer be contained. Chen, who had been frantically working on her equipment, managed to establish communication with the surface through an emergency system. The response she received left her pale with terror. "Rome is sending a containment team," she announced, her voice trembling. "They call it Protocol Seraphim. They arrive in 6 hours." Miller laughed bitterly. "Containment? They're going to eliminate us, all of us. This discovery is too big, too dangerous. They can't allow it to get out." The realization hit Toretti like a punch to the gut. They weren't explorers on a scientific discovery mission. They were inconvenient witnesses to something that threatened the very power structure of the Church. If the existence of the Nephilim became public knowledge, it would not only revolutionize archaeology and theology, but also question the moral authority of any institution that had hidden this truth for millennia. "There's a way out," the entity whispered in their minds.
But it requires a choice. You can remain prisoners of your human limitations, or you can accept a small portion of the knowledge I can offer, enough to understand how to escape this prison and expose the truth to the world. "What's the price?" Toretti asked, though he knew he didn't want to hear the answer. "A permanent connection. Part of your consciousness will be linked to mine. You will see the world as I see it, through the veil of illusions your species has created to protect itself from reality. And once you see, you can never return to ignorance." Time was running out. Chen reported that she could hear helicopters approaching. Protocol Seraphim, whatever it was almost there, and Toretti suspected it involved much more than simply resealing the chamber. Miller made the decision first. "I accept," he said aloud. "I need to know the truth, even if it destroys me." What followed defied description. A light that wasn't light filled the chamber, and Toretti felt his consciousness expanding beyond the confines of his physical brain. For a moment, he saw the universe as it truly was. Not the ordered and comprehensible cosmos described by science, but a fractal multiverse of infinite possibilities, where matter and energy were merely superficial manifestations of far more complex information patterns. He saw Earth as it was 6,000 years ago, when the Nephilim walked freely among humans, teaching them arts and sciences that dangerously accelerated the development of civilization. He saw the flood not as a natural event or divine punishment, but as a necessary intervention to prevent humanity from evolving too quickly and destroying itself with knowledge it wasn't ready to handle. He also saw the future, lines of possibility stretching across time like rays of prismatized light. In many of these lines, the seals containing the Nephilim broke completely, and humanity faced a new age of knowledge and terror in equal measure. In others, the secrets remained hidden, and the human species continued its ignorant, protected evolution. When the vision ended, Toretti found himself back in the chamber, but everything had changed. Chen was on her knees, tears streaming down her face as she contemplated mathematical equations that had spontaneously appeared in her mind, formulas that could revolutionize quantum physics if she had the courage to share them. Miller stood transfixed, his eyes reflecting a profound and terrible understanding of reality's true nature. The wall imprisoning them in the chamber had dissolved, not physically, but conceptually. They could now see through it, understanding that the barriers were mental constructs as much as physical ones. With the knowledge received, they simply walked through the solid stone as if it were mist. On the surface, they found the camp in chaos. The Egyptian workers had fled during the night, leaving behind only abandoned equipment and still burning campfires. On the horizon, a fleet of black helicopters approached, carrying men dressed as military personnel, but bearing symbols that Toretti recognized as belonging to the secret order of the Knights of the Golden Eagle, an organization within the church that dealt with supernatural anomalies. "We need to separate," Miller said, his voice now carrying harmonics that didn't entirely belong to human speech. Chen agreed, quickly collecting some of her most valuable instruments. "I'll try to reach the United States. I have contacts at MIT who might be interested in what we've discovered, if I can present it in a way that doesn't sound completely insane." Toretti knew his only chance was to return to Rome and try to navigate the Vatican bureaucracy from within. Perhaps he could find allies among the progressive cardinals, men who would understand that hiding the truth was more dangerous than gradually revealing it. Before they separated, Miller handed Toretti a small stone he had collected from the chamber, a fragment covered with strange hieroglyphs that seemed to glow with their own light. "Keep this," he said. "It's a key. If the other seals begin to weaken, you will know. The stone will get hotter, and the symbols will become brighter." The three fled in different directions moments before the helicopters landed. Toretti managed to reach a nearby village, where well-placed bribes secured him transport to Alexandria, and from there, a flight back to Rome. In the months that followed, Toretti desperately tried to find a way to reveal what he had discovered without destroying his own life. He wrote meticulously crafted reports for his superiors, presenting the findings as potentially apocryphal texts or alternative interpretations of obscure biblical passages. But the small stone he carried became a constant barometer of events beyond his ability to influence. It warmed during major geopolitical events. The Cuban Missile Crisis nearly melted it in his hand. It glowed more intensely during solar eclipses and geomagnetic storms. And gradually, as human technology advanced, it remained consistently warm, as if something were slowly awakening around the world. Dr. Chen disappeared 3 months after returning to the United States. Her colleagues at MIT reported that she had begun working on theories they considered brilliant but impossible to implement with current technology. Her last notes, found in her apartment, consisted mainly of diagrams that seemed to map connections between quantum physics and human consciousness, work that was immediately classified by the American government. Dr. Miller resurfaced briefly in East Germany, where he attempted to contact Soviet archaeologists interested in his theories about prehistoric civilizations. But his letters were intercepted by the Stasi, and he was found dead in his Berlin apartment, officially a victim of a heart attack, though witnesses reported his face registered absolute terror at the moment of death. Father Toretti survived longer, perhaps because his position within the church offered him some protection. But he knew he was being watched. Phone calls were strangely interrupted, correspondence disappeared, and he occasionally noticed the same faces in crowds in different cities. In 1975, 7 years after the discovery in Egypt, the stone began to burn constantly. Toretti understood that the seals were deteriorating faster than the entity had predicted. He made a desperate decision. He would reveal everything in a detailed manuscript that he would deposit in several secure locations around the world, hoping that at least one copy would survive to warn future generations. He never had the chance to complete his plan. On the morning of November 12, 1975, Toretti was found dead in his Vatican quarters. The official cause was myocardial infarction, but those who found the body reported that his hands were burned, as if he had held something extremely hot, and on his desk there were only ashes that seemed to be the remains of burned papers. The small stone was never found. But the story doesn't end there. In the following years, other similar discoveries were reported in remote locations around the world. A secret excavation in the Himalayas uncovered a sealed chamber containing evidence of impossible technology. Archaeologists working on submerged ruins in the Mediterranean reported anomalies that were immediately classified by the governments involved. And in 1981, an expedition funded by a mysterious organization called the Prometheus Foundation allegedly found evidence of a lost library in Antarctica, containing texts describing interactions between humans and fallen angels in prehistoric times. Each of these discoveries was quickly suppressed, participants disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances, and the locations were sealed or destroyed. But patterns began to emerge for those who knew how to look. Obscure websites shared fragments of information. Scientists reported similar dreams involving impossible geometric symbols. And around the world, sensitive individuals reported visions of angels that didn't fit into any known religious tradition. What makes this account particularly disturbing is that many of the events described can be verified through partial public records. Padre Pio did die in 1968, a few months after the events described in this manuscript. Dr. Henry Miller existed, though his official biography omits his years in the Nazi organization Ahnenerbe and his post-war activities. And Vatican records, where available, show significant spending on archaeological expeditions during the 1960s and 1970s, though the specific details remain classified. The question we must ask is not whether these events occurred exactly as described, but whether our reality is truly as simple and understandable as we would like to believe. If entities like the Nephilim truly exist, confined in ancient prisons around the world, then the coming years may bring revelations that will fundamentally change our understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. And if you look closely at recent world events, the increase in UFO sightings being acknowledged by governments, archaeological discoveries that defy established chronologies, scientific anomalies that cannot be explained by current theories, you may begin to see patterns that suggest the seals may indeed be weakening. Toretti's stone was never found, but that doesn't mean it disappeared. Perhaps it's waiting in the hands of someone who understands its true meaning, someone prepared to face the implications of what its increasing activation might represent for the future of humanity. If this account resonates with experiences you've had, strange dreams that have disturbed you, or if you've begun to notice patterns in world events that others seem to ignore, perhaps it's time to consider that reality may be far more complex and dangerous than our civilization is prepared to admit. The real question isn't whether we should seek these hidden secrets, but whether we are prepared for the consequences of finding them. For, as Toretti learned, some knowledge carries a price that may be greater than our sanity can bear. And you, reader, after knowing this narrative, do you believe there are truths so disturbing that it's better to keep them hidden, or that humanity has the right to know the complete reality about its own existence, regardless of the consequences?